Welcome to the second session of this conference. This is another elephant. You see, there will be many elephants here, and I'm moderating this session. It's called Green Chill, Revealing Plants' Cool Secrets. This is an elephant because it has been ignored. So I will start with another cartoon done by the same Jimmy Eisenstein from the US. And I hope this will paint what the whole session will be dealing with. And so that we have a nice start for the discussion about plants and temperature.
In a time of rising temperatures and climate instability, most of the attention goes to greenhouse gases. But there is another way, often overlooked, to stabilize the climate and cool the planet: plants. Unlike high-tech geoengineering schemes, forests, wetlands, grasslands, and marine ecosystems bring numerous benefits beyond just cooling the atmosphere. They increase biodiversity, they can prevent floods, and prevent erosion. But for now, let's talk about how they stabilize the weather and promote cooling. We all know that plants drink water through their roots, but what happens to that water? Most of it comes out through the leaves as part of the process of photosynthesis. In fact, for each molecule of carbon dioxide fixed and each molecule of oxygen released, several hundred molecules of water are evaporated. This is what we call transpiration. And it cools the forest in the same way sweat cools the body, the evaporation absorbing the heat. That's why forests feel so cool. It isn't just the shade. On the edge of the Amazon rainforest, temperatures are consistently 5 degrees cooler than on farms just a short walk away. And in Sumatra, native forests have been measured to be 10 degrees cooler than neighboring palm plantations. Leaves aren't just leaves. They're home to many species of bacteria, some of which are light enough to rise high up into the atmosphere along with the transpired water vapor. These bacteria are small, but much larger than the water vapor particles. So the gaseous water vapor uses the surface of the bacteria to condense into liquid droplets, creating clouds much more quickly. Forests, grasslands, and marine ecosystems each produce their own kind of condensation nuclei as well. In this way, plants seed clouds. When the water condenses at cloud level, it releases the heat that it absorbed during evaporation. Therefore, transpiration moves heat from the ground level, where it would have been trapped by greenhouse gases, up to high altitudes, where a lot of it, as much as half according to some experts, radiates back into space. Heat exits the Earth, and the Earth cools down. Now what if for some reason we didn't have the plants here? Well, then we wouldn't have the condensation nuclei, so the water vapor wouldn't be able to form clouds, and would form a haze instead. Then it causes heating, not cooling, because uncondensed water vapor is itself a greenhouse gas. So we know from the previous 2 points that more plants means more clouds, because of the transpiration and the condensation nuclei. While clouds have all kinds of warming and cooling effects depending on various conditions, on average we get a net cooling effect. Overall, more clouds means a cooler atmosphere, because clouds reflect sunlight. Another important feature of clouds is that they make rain. The worst damage from climate change comes not from heat per se, but from floods, droughts, fires, and irregular rainfall. Intact ecosystems help extend the rainy season by absorbing water into the soil, which replenish aquifers and feed springs, which then feed water to plants to keep them green and transpiring. This makes them way more resilient to fire. Healthy soils and wetlands are also like a sponge that mitigates flooding during the rainy season. You know how carbon is a pretty major greenhouse gas? Well, plants are made mostly of carbon. Not only does their growth directly take carbon out of the atmosphere, but lots of it goes underground, taking the form of their roots, as well as carbon-containing compounds the roots exude. This carbon that was once in the atmosphere stays underground, sometimes for hundreds of years if left undisturbed. Grasslands and wetlands are especially good at sequestering carbon. Okay, great, let's just plant trees anywhere and everywhere and fix climate change right now. What are we waiting for? Well, be careful. There have been a number of reforestation efforts, and some have ended in disaster. For example, when fast-growing trees suck up the available water and die, leaving the land a desert. That kind of thing often happens when we use carbon calculations to guide ecosystem regeneration. We have to think holistically. A healthy forest is more than a bunch of trees. A palm oil plantation has a lot of trees, but it doesn't make clouds, cool the air, build soil, or prevent drought like a forest does. Not just forests, but all ecosystems are like organs of a living planet. Like your organs, they control the body temperature, direct its fluids, and maintain the life of the whole.
I want to thank Jan Gisbert for calling my attention to this video. He was a little bit scared that scientists would make it completely impenetrable. He said, Antonio, we must watch videos like this, and here you have it. So then the second tire of this preparation is to introduce some very basic and key concepts that we usually don't have about the whole planetary system. This is data from NASA AIRS sensor in Aqua satellite, showing water vapor integrated the whole column around the world. And you see that there is a garland, or a ring, if you will, of water vapor around the equator. So this basically tells you that Earth is like an engine. You have the heat part around the equator because you have more solar radiation, vertical. And then you have the cooling, the poles as radiators. So connecting this heating and cooling is done by flows. And you see in 4 of 5 presentations that will come now about this transport of moisture. And it's been shown before, but it's the same sensor. You can see the daily data showing the pulsation of the big forests and in producing this pulse of water vapor in the atmosphere and the importance. And then finally, a quick sort of notion about the distribution of power, vegetation power in controlling the climate. This is the usual picture you see from the satellite of where you have green vegetation all around the world. It's called EVI, Vegetation Index. And you see that you have, except for the deserts, either dry or ice, frozen deserts, everywhere on Earth you have green plants growing. However, when you look to the primary productivity, you see that the big carbon engine of the planet lies in the tropical belt for obvious reasons. You have more sunshine, warm year-round, etc. So when we say that the Amazon and the tropical forests are the hearts of the world, it's not an understatement. It's a real fact. That said, it's not only a problem of 9 countries in South America or in Indonesia or in Africa. It's a problem of everybody because we're dealing with a planetary organ that is the biggest part is in those tropical latitudes. And so it justifies also why we have people talking about flows. And the justification comes to this next. This is a creative way. The data of photosynthesis from satellite was pictured by the group of Yadvinder Mali from Oxford University. And you see the changing shape is, of course, it's an artistic way of showing the importance of each patch of the ecosystem. Each frame is showing the relative importance for the whole biosphere. So what you see is that, the desert doesn't appear because they don't have vegetation, and the higher latitudes only appear in the spring and summer, and disappear in the autumn and winter. So you see the heartbeat, right? Talking about hearts. It's a heartbeat. The biosphere is beating. And so the next presentations will be about cardiologists in Earth system science. So they will be talking about flows and the importance and the focus on the Amazon. First, because they are experts in the subjects. Each one is expert in their area. But also because the Amazon is indeed the heart of the planet, the beating heart of the planet. Okay, now I call my colleagues and ask them to introduce themselves. The first one is Paulo Nobre, who has the same name not by chance, my brother. And he will talk about some cool stuff.
Antonio's introduction remarks were remarkable because they caught my attention to how do we do it. And I would like to start honoring the ground, honoring the whole life that is around us, that oftentimes we don't see, the life inside us that Antonio Miracle showed us. I'd like to thank Mike, the Technical University, for hosting us, and in your name, the German people, because we oftentimes forget to thank. And then this challenge today is, how can we honor this? How can we honor embracing nature complexity? How can we encapsulate, like in a seed, complexity without losing information? And I will invite you to meditate about this when you go home tonight. There's this one concept, it is one word that encompasses complexity and embracing, and this word is love. Now, then I would like to, some technicalities. Why forests drive life or drive the oceans? So let's dive in. Think about this. This is a photograph I took from an airplane flying over the Amazon River. The birth of the Amazon River is the summation of two large rivers that cross the largest rainforest in the planet. Think the unthinkable. It's hard to think the unthinkable by definition. So the unthinkable is that we one day could have one of such rivers, the Negro River, dry, so you could cross it walking. That happened last year, October. And the other river too, Solimões River. So this is a fisherman crossing it by foot. So how come that happens? So then comes the work I do in Brazil. And we took our model and we took the Amazon forest out. We put savanna in place of the forest. And we integrated this model several times, and like we do, and have a control run, that is the left, and the experiment run is the right, and we do the difference between them. And what we get when we took the Amazon forest is first a warming over the continent, but also warming over the oceans. And we get less rainfall over the continent, but more rainfall over the ocean. For those that are familiar with this is called ENSO, the El Nino Southern Oscillation. So what we discovered was that the Amazon forest plays a role controlling the intensity of ENSO. Unthinkable that Amazon could, by atmospheric circulation, this is the power spectrum of the control run, and this is the power spectrum of the Amazon out. And how does it happen? Atmospheric circulation induced by the ocean. So first the Amazon induces the ocean temperature and currents, and then the ocean retroflects, further reducing rainfall over there. Now, how much? This is how much. This is a full forest, how much our model produces, 1,800 millimeters per year, average. But if we substitute by low trees, we get a little reduction. If we put shrubs on that, we have further reduction. And this is over a desert area. I took Arabic Peninsula, and this is Nilo. Now pay attention what will appear here that connects what with Antonio just showed us. This is the heat really released and absorbed by these rainfall processes. Latent heat is absorbed in the lower troposphere and is released. And the colors are matching. So the more rainfall, the more heat is released in the middle and upper atmosphere, so contributing to the heat pump that Hugo mentioned to us. This is an actual functioning heat pump. Now, I want to put in context climate change, global warming effects on rainfall and temperature. This is what we did, the normal IPCC CMIP, IPCC run in our model. And we increase carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, and this is how much rainfall reduction or increase we get, and this is how much temperature increase. And you see that the maximum here, somewhere there, it's around 4 degrees in our model. Now, when we include the Amazon deforestation, we include savanization instead. This is what we get. The reduction is interiorized and spread all over southward, the reduction in rainfall, and temperature increases that were 4 go to up to 10 degrees Celsius increase. Now pay attention to this. Now what is the color there in the center is 90%. So in our model, the forest is responsible for 90% of the rainfall that falls on top of it. Because climate change alone, we're not capable to such a deep reduction. Now, you may think, and I heard it several times, oh, you are too exaggerated. It will take hundreds of years for the Amazon to savannize and to tip over. Maybe. Think it over. We already spotted savanna wolves wandering into the Amazon forest. Do you think they're lost? No, they're not. They have an inner GPS that never fails. We are lost. So, I would like to leave a takeaway. This is, today's is tomorrow's yesterday. Is my wife and my younger son. He was 5 years old. We were at breakfast table. And he said, Dad, you know, that today is tomorrow's yesterday. And I said, wow. What that means is that we can build our past today. And we can also build our future today. And this is what we have. This is Nordstrom. And I learned from Antonio that this idea from Nordstrom, it was actually initiated by Viktor Goshkov in one previous conference. We have Holocene Earth, and we are at the brink of choosing a new future. It's always new. But it can either be a future dystopian, that is what we live today in big cities, smelling chemical, eating poisoned food and water, or a bright future. And this is what we can do today. So, my wish is that we can leave this as our legacy. Healthy forests, but it is a single story. We must leave love as our legacy, because love encompasses everything, from sunshine to mothers feeding breast. And this is again not my phrase, this is Ban Ki-moon in Geneva in 2009. This is the responsibility of our generation. He was mentioning climate change, but I am rephrasing it, that the importance of regulating forests and and love.
Herman from Columbia National University.
Thank you. Good morning to everyone. First of all, I would like to thank the Technical University of Munich for the invitation and Dr. Anastasia Makarieva for inviting us to participate in this fundamental conference. I'm going to talk about natural forest classification and moisture fluxes in South America. So, first of all, before going to the Amazon, I'm going to go to the rainiest place on earth. Which is in Colombia, west Pacific coast of Colombia. And the water for that rainfall comes from several sources. Large-scale atmospheric transportation mechanisms like low-level jets and area rivers. Over the Caribbean Sea, we have a low-level jet. Over the far eastern Pacific, we have another low-level jet called the Chocó jet. And over the eastern part of the Andes, we have the Orinoco jet and the South American low-level jet that takes water from the Amazon into the La Plata River basin. So with these four fundamental transport mechanisms of water vapor, we get rainfall not only for the Amazon, but for the rainiest place on earth, which is located over the Pacific coast of Colombia, where mean annual rainfall is between 10,000 and 13,000 millimeters per year. Mean annual rainfall, with years of 26,000 millimeters per year. So this is an extraordinary region to explore and to understand tropical hydrology, tropical meteorology. And one of the reasons why we have so much rainfall there is because the Caribbean low-level jet and the Chocó low-level jet converge into this region, transporting tremendous amount of water to the region and causing this type of circulation. Let me see if it works here. Yeah. So the Chocó low-level jet is blowing from the Pacific, and the Caribbean low-level jet is blowing from the Caribbean Sea to the Pacific coast of Colombia. And they converge there. There's a lot of convection. The warm air and the humid air is transported from the lower parts of the atmosphere to the top of the atmosphere to cause this tremendous amount of rainfall, which is in many cases associated with the so-called mesoscale convective systems. These are huge systems. This one has like 1,500 kilometers long, and it stays there for 14, 18 hours, raining all the time. So explaining why do we have the rainiest place on the Pacific coast of Colombia. But it is not only the transport of water vapor by this mechanism, but also due to the evapotranspiration on the rainforest over the west coast of Colombia. In these two graphs, you can see this is a mathematical technique called singular value decomposition, but never mind. It allows to state in space what configuration of one variable, at the left we have evapotranspiration, is associated with what spatial configuration of the other variable, which is rainfall. And as you can see there, the red colors, put attention to the red colors, which are the regions which are associated. So red colors, evapotranspiration from the rainforest and also from the Central American forest is associated very much with rainfall all over the place. So evapotranspiration from the forest, rainforest of Colombia, is also responsible for having the rainiest place on earth over the west coast of Colombia. Now let's go to the Amazon River basin. Let's see. What I'm going to show you here is the diurnal beating, cardiologist, as you were saying, of the Amazon rainforest. These are the results of a very sophisticated climatic model, high resolution in space and time, climatic model, which is going to show us 4 months, I guess, yeah, on an hourly basis of the production and transport of water vapor in South America, especially associated with the Amazon River Basin. So, colors here represent concentration of water vapor. So, higher, lower concentration in pink or violet, and higher concentration in white. So you see here that water is evaporating from the ocean, transported into the continent, but also in the Amazon River Basin, this water is recycled several times and is taken all over the Amazon Basin up to the Andes, and then the Andes veers, the wind veers in the Andes and takes the water onto the La Plata River Basin, providing water for cities like Sao Paulo, Buenos Aires, and Montevideo, for instance. So, and there you see the beating, because the beating is the diurnal cycle. Plants evapotranspire water during daylight hours. So there you can see the heart of the Amazon beating, pumping water to the atmosphere at that rate. So in that way, we can see that the forest in the Amazon provide water for many towns and cities in the Andes. For instance, the water for Bogota, for La Paz, for Quito comes from the Amazon. So if we deforest the Amazon basin, we are causing troubles in water for the cities. And as you could see, there are preferential pathways of this moisture transport. And this is a paper we published 10 years ago examining how this moisture, these water vapor aerial rivers, as we call it, are transported or have preferential pathways in South America. So we identified these pathways depending on the seasons of the year, and then over those pathways we examine one of the predictions of the biotic pump mechanism, which says that if we weren't for the forest, rainfall would decrease exponentially from ocean to land. And when we submitted this prediction to the test in South America, we found that indeed rainfall doesn't decay exponentially with the distance from the ocean, and it's because of the forest. In a summary, we found that of those preferential pathways, we identified that the area rivers and the rainfall over these pathways satisfy the prediction of the biotic pump mechanism, 23 out of 37, and not in 8 of those pathways, the hypothesis of the theory didn't satisfy this behavior. And it was because of orography or topography or even other type of covered lands. But over forest lands, we found that the theory is satisfied over these pathways of area rivers in South America. Last but not least, I would like to give you this hydrological perspective. I'm a hydrologist, so I cannot forget about that, because this is also a very fundamental idea that the Andes and the Amazon are part of a coupled system, because of course the headwaters of the Amazon River are in the high Andes, but also because the low-lying Amazon exports water vapor to the Andes, and then water vapors is uplifted by the topography of the Andes. It rains there, but the Andes provide runoff, sediments, and nutrients to the low-lying Amazon. You know, the extraordinary biodiversity of the Amazon is based on this fundamental amount of nutrients that come from the Andes to the low-lying Amazon. So we need to preserve this coupled system in order to maintain the stability of the water cycle in South America and in the world. And with that, I thank you.
Our next speaker is Juan Fernando, a pupil of had one many years ago from University of Antioquia. We will continue on the same cardiological subject, Earth systems cardiological subject.
Thank you, Antonio, and let me start by saying that I'm really, really happy to be here. It's an honor. Thank you, Anastasia, and Ray, and Antonio, for inviting me, and thank you all of you for being here. So, maybe you have heard that forests are like lungs, and that's because these ecosystems roll in exchanging gases with the atmosphere, mainly carbon and oxygen, which is truly important. However, this metaphor misses a very important part of the story, which is about water. So I will tell you a different metaphor. I will say that forests are like beating hearts, and I will use the Amazon forest in South America, my home continent, as an example. So I will say that the Amazon is the beating heart of the water cycle in South America. So why I think this? First, because we have a lot of scientific evidence. There are many different studies about this. Of course, there are differences among studies, but in my view, all the studies support a common conclusion, which is that rainfall all across the continent will not be as we know it if the forest was not there. And the evidence about this keeps growing with the new models, the new data, the new techniques, and everything. We reach the same conclusion. Rainfall will not be the same if we lose the Amazon forest. Now I'm having trouble. Okay. So what I'm saying is that there is a double-way relationship between rainfall and the forest. And this is important because it challenges an old idea. The old idea is that we have a forest like the Amazon, which is called a rainforest because it rains a lot. That's true, but incomplete and potentially misleading, because you may think that the rainfall is like a prerequisite for the forest, or you may think that you first have the rainfall and then you have the forest, and that's a mistake, because we know that in this place we have a lot of rainfall also because of the forest, because the forest is there, so the relationship is double way. And this is an example of what I'm saying, which supports the biotic pond theory. This is a behavior we observe in South America. What we found is that precipitation grows with distance to the ocean and grows very rapidly. So what I'm saying is that if you start walking from the Atlantic coast in South America inland toward the Andes, you can walk along thousands of kilometers, and you will find that precipitation increases with distance to the ocean, which is not an obvious result, which is not the expected result everywhere. Indeed, there are many places where we have the opposite behavior. I mean, precipitation where precipitation reduces with distance to the ocean. And a very important part of this story is that this behavior occurs over the forest and only over the forest. So the question is if this is just a coincidence, and we don't think so. First, because we have the biotic pump. I will not explain the biotic pump in front of Anastasia. She will have a talk later, but we have this beating heart sucking and pumping water throughout the continent. And one thing I want to add is that the forest itself is a major source of water for precipitation. It's like a green ocean. So we have a lot of water. The forest have an exceptional ability to send water to the atmosphere, and not only water, because as Antonio said, precipitation is a complex recipe. You don't make a good cake only with flour or eggs. You need many things. So precipitation is like that. So the forest send the water to the atmosphere, send other things, and you have precipitation on land. So what I'm saying is that precipitation on land originates on land. So when we have that, we talk about recycled precipitation, and in the Amazon, this recycled precipitation accounts for around 30 or even 50% of precipitation within the same basin. And this precipitation is not only for the forest itself, but for the whole continent. So at the end, what we have is like a very powerful conveyor belt of moisture. So what we have in South America is like a big river, atmospheric river, flowing over the forest. And the amount of water that this river can transport is even larger than the amount of water the surface Amazon River, which is huge, is transporting towards the ocean. So if you have heard that the Amazon River is the largest river on Earth, that's true, but only if you are talking about surface rivers. Because if you consider the aerial rivers, maybe you want to think that you can have even more water flowing over the Amazon River. So it's a very powerful mechanism. And this is the mechanism we may lose if we lose the forest. This is the video you already saw. I don't know if I have internet. No. Please remember, this was the video Herman just showed it, and this is the beating of the heart, of the forest heart. And one thing I want to add is that the moisture in the atmosphere is sent all over the continent, across river basins. And that's very important because it means, okay, in the video, the Amazon was sending moisture to the southern part of South America, where we have the Paraná and the Rio de la Plata basins. That's the normal pattern during the austral summer. And in these basins, big numbers, I remember like 70% of precipitation there could be from the Amazon. So it's a huge number, but in other parts of the year, the moisture is sent to my country, for instance. This is the Magdalena River in Colombia. This is a very important river for us in Colombia. You can read about this, for instance, in a wonderful novel by Gabriel Garcia Marquez entitled The Love in the Times of Cholera. This river is important there. There's also a wonderful river, a wonderful book by an American writer entitled Magdalena River of Dreams. Was wrote by Wade Davis. So this is very important. Most people in Colombia live in this basin. I live in this basin. Herman lives in this basin. Most people in Colombia uses water from this basin. We have hydropower from this basin, almost everything. And since I was a child, I was taught that this river is our river. It's a Colombian river because, as you can see, all the basin is within my country. So we feel that it's our river. But since I started to study these atmospheric connections, I realized that this is not as Colombian as I was taught. because this river depends strongly on the Amazon. Around 30% of the water we use in this basin comes from the Amazon, and it could be even more. So this beating heart of the hydrological cycle in South America send us the water for our main river, and this is true for almost every basin in South America. So let me just conclude by saying that protecting a forest like the Amazon is much more than a story about carbon or biodiversity. It is protecting the beating heart of the water cycle in a continent like South America, and since we depend on water for almost everything, protecting this forest is protecting ourselves. Thank you.
10 minutes, Scott.
Thank you, Antonio. Thank you, Anastasia, Andre, Tum, and everybody. This has been a wonderful start to a great week. I'm very excited to be here. I'm going to talk about what you see here. I'm going to shift scales a little bit. I'm going to talk about the local scale. By that, I mean the scale of what you see here. A few hectares of forest that can be measured by this tower. We're going to talk about, we know about transpiration, we know about recycling. I'm going to put it in the context of what we sometimes call forest tipping points, which is very related to what happens when we perturb this cycle of transpiration in atmospheric rivers and so on. And I want to acknowledge Natalia Restrepo-Coupe, who's been the longest term member of my research group. She's a senior scientist with us, and this paper was just published a few months ago, and it's sort of on this basis that I'm going to talk. I'm going to, before I explain anything, I want to put before you this image, this meme of what a tipping point looks like through a scientist's eyes. It's the sort of S-shaped thing. I'll explain it more in a minute, but for now, just think of it as a yin-yang symbol for the Earth system. It has this S-shaped interaction between two different opposites. And so what I'm going to, so I'll come back to this in a second. First, but just an outline of our discussion. What is a tipping point scientifically? What is a deforestation-induced tipping point for the Amazon? We've actually already heard about this from Paulo. And the hypothesis here that we want to test is we can observe a local canopy scale tipping point at the local scale. We mostly have talked about it today and in all the literature about this as an Amazon basin-wide thing, but we're going to see that it's not only that. And the implications that has for how do we save the largest rainforest on Earth. Okay, to come back to this, we scientists, we love these graphs. These two-dimensional graphs are like in every talk that everybody gives, and this is our favorite method of communication, and sometimes we maybe need help to convey what it means. It's a two-axis graph, which generally shows the input on the horizontal axis, and here this is some kind of ecosystem stressor, drought or deforestation. And on the vertical axis, we show the outcome of that perturbation. And so here we have an image of how we think about tipping points. This vertical axis is ecosystem function of some kind, like transpiration capacity of the forest. And up high, that indicates a region of healthy forest that has high transpiration capacity, or if you're talking about the Amazon as a whole, a high degree of forest land cover. And as you move to greater and greater stress, you follow that red line. And the red line goes down a little bit, but it stays within this range of high functioning until we get to a tipping point. And once you get to this critical transition part, you sort of fall off that edge and you fall down here, which is also stable. If you move back and forth here, you stay in this range, which is very different from that range. And you can't actually get back up to there until you really crank down on the stress, way down to a much lower level than you had before. And that's the key aspect of tipping point, these two things. Abrupt transition, once you reach a critical transition point, and irreversibility, or at least very hard to reverse without doing a lot of changing back again. Okay, so we have seen already, here's a cartoon of what Paulo and others have talked about, this recycling that feeds the flying rivers. This is a third to a half of the precipitation that falls on the whole basin comes through this recycling mechanism. And it can be disruptive. Of course, if we cut down the forests, as we saw from the great simulation of Paulo, we know this slows recycling. It's magnificent science. We get very excited about the science as scientists, but then we sort of think, wow, this is really, we should be worried about this as human beings. So we could put that, Paulo simulation on this kind of tipping point graph where we see you reach so we have deforestation now, and we have tree cover as the ecosystem function, and you reach a certain level of deforestation, and suddenly you cut off enough of this recycling so that even the intact forests start dying. And an early version of this was I just want to point this out, was done by yet another Nobre, Carlos Nobre, 20 some years ago. So we've studied this a lot now. And so what I want to ask though is this: I'm going to pose this hypothesis that there could be not deforestation, but a drought-induced tipping point at the local scale, the function of the local forest. And here we're looking at transpiration canopy, transpiration capacity of the canopy, and how it's affected by drought, and whether it falls off this ledge. And in order to do this, we need to make a lot of measurements at the local scale, and for a long time. And I will use this clip from Pascal's magnificent documentary film about Rio Roedores to show how we make these measurements. And it was a great honor to participate in this. And here
We have fine rivers taking water from one end of the Amazon basin to the other. And these rivers are supplied by hundreds of billions of individual tributaries, which are the trees we see in the forest all around us.
But it's not easy to quantify the respiration of the forest from the data of only a few dozen trees. To account for the variability of the situations of trees and other plants that also emit water vapor, a number of tools have been developed. Scott Zaleska fought hard to install high towers equipped with these sophisticated instruments.
Every day we get a pulse of the life of the forest. And we're able to measure not only the individual fluxes of each of those tributaries on the ground with those sap flux measurements, but we can measure the total amount, the total flow of that geyser with the special instrumentation on this tower.
This anemometer records the wind speed around the tower with a high degree of precision and in 3 dimensions.
And we can see how much water vapor is in the wind coming down, which is dry, and how much water vapor is in the wind going up, which is wet. And that difference gives us a measure of that 30 tons of water that's coming off of every hectare of forest upwind of the tower in that direction.
So that's what we do. So now I want to ask the question, what did we find with our measurements from this tower? So I'm going to tell you the story of the tale of 2 droughts compared to a lot of normal years. And what we see here is another one of these graphs that we love to show, 2-axis graphs. On the horizontal is time, going from July, which we start with because it's the start of the dry season in this forest, going through the next June. And what this vertical axis shows is what we call cumulative water deficit, which is the amount of dryness we're experiencing. You can think about it as the millimeters of rain we would need to eliminate the deficit. And in an average year, which is in this black line, during the dry season, the deficit increases as it gets drier and drier, and then the rains return and it reduces the depth down to 0 and go through the year. What we can see here is a quantification of the 2 biggest droughts we've had over 20 years of measurements since 2002. The 2002-2003 El Nino and the 2015-2016 El Nino, which were much drier than average, but were comparably dry. So what I want to show you next is a similar graph that looks at the temperature. And this is, again, the average temperature cycle. It's hotter in the dry season, looking at this black line. It gets cooler in the wet season. But what you can see here, very interestingly, is the droughts were very different. The 2002 El Nino drought was about average in temperature, but the 2015-16 drought was almost the hottest year we've seen in 20 years. And so we want to look at use the tower measurements to look at what the impacts of these 2 droughts were compared to average. And I plotted it on a graph that instead of time, it's the degree of dryness versus the transpiration capacity of the forest. And you can see on average, if you look at that dashed line, it's about 75% of the incoming energy goes into transpiration. And you can see all the little gray lines are individual years. The black line is the average of those years, and the blue line is the 2002 drought. And you can see all of those years, it's almost the same. It bounces around a little bit, but the transpiration capacity of the forest is very robust to dry season, wet season, and drought, except in 2015. In 2015, we fell off an edge. We fell off a cliff.